Good morning and welcome to Good Morning Africa, where we'll be bringing you the latest in news stories from across the continent and beyond. My name is Glenora Shipura and this is Ashwin Berry.
And I feel fantastic, as you should whenever you're watching Africa Good Morning on a Friday morning. And today is World Beverages Day. Friday and beverages sounds like a good match to me. Even assuming we could survive without drinking anything, could you imagine a world without milk to go with cookies, coffee to go with cake, cold beer on a warm day? Can you imagine that?
And it's a Friday.
It's a Friday, so, World Beverages Day. Enjoy your beverages day. I personally like coffee in the morning. What do you like? Check out the video. Today is Friday, the 6th of May, and these are your top stories. 7 dead in attack on Chibok community in northeast Nigeria. Rebel fighters have killed at least 7 people in an attack in northeast Borno State in Nigeria, witnesses have told the Associated Press. The rebels attacked Kautukari village in the Chibok area of Borno on Tuesday evening, residents said on Wednesday. The attack happened at the same time that UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres was in the state to meet with survivors of violence by the armed group Boko Haram. The Chibok area is 115 kilometers from Maiduguri, the state capital, where Guterres met with former fighters being reintegrated into society and thousands of people displaced by armed groups. More than 35,000 people have died and millions have been displaced by the violence, according to the UN Development Program. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari said earlier this week that the war against the group is approaching its conclusion, citing continued military attacks and the mass defection of thousands of the fighters, some of whom analysts say are laying down their arms because of infighting within the group.
In our next story, AU says Burundi peacekeepers killed in Al-Shabaab attack. The African Union says a number of Burundian peacekeepers were killed on Tuesday by rebels who attacked a remote military base in Somalia. The continental body condemned the attack and paid tribute to the Burundian peacekeepers who lost their lives helping to bring peace and stability to Somalia in a statement issued on Wednesday. It did not say how many peacekeepers were killed, but the Burundian army also said on Wednesday that 10 of its peacekeepers were killed at the base. Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the attack on the base in Al-Baraf, a small town 150 kilometers north of the Somali capital, Mogadishu, in the Middle Shabelle region. The group circulated a video purporting to show the bodies of peacekeepers as well as military equipment seized in the attack. Tuesday's attack was the latest by Al-Shabaab, which opposes the presence of foreign troops in Somalia. The group, which is fighting to impose Islamic law across the country, has stepped up its attacks in recent months amid political tension as Somalia tries to elect a new president. Burundi is one of the countries contributing troops to the African Union mission in Somalia, also known by initials ATMIS. Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Djibouti also have soldiers deployed to the mission.
Zelensky calls for longer truce to evacuate Mariupol civilians. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called for a longer ceasefire in order to evacuate more civilians from the battered city of Mariupol in southern Ukraine as Russia intensifies its assault on the Azovstal steel plant, the last holdout of Ukrainian forces there. About 200 civilians, including children, are said to be taking shelter in the sprawling plant's underground bunkers, and Zelensky Zelensky said it was necessary to continue the silence to get them all out. Zelensky again appealed for the assistance of the United Nations after the UN and Red Cross evacuated hundreds of people from Mariupol and other areas this week. Now, a Ukrainian parliamentarian said Russian forces were inside the Azovstal plant, and the commander of the regiment inside the vast factory said the situation was extremely difficult and that his soldiers were engaged in heavy, bloody battles with the Russians. Moscow has denied any assault on Azovstal is underway and says its forces will cease fire to open a humanitarian corridor for civilians for 3 days from Thursday. More than 300 civilians were evacuated on Wednesday from Mariupol and other areas in southern Ukraine as part of a joint UN Red Cross operation, UN humanitarian coordinator for Ukraine, Osnat Lubrani, said.
Germany ready to continue UN mission in Mali. Germany is willing to continue with UN peacekeeping mission in Mali, even though it is ending its participation in a European Union training mission in Mali. Defense Minister Christine Lambrecht said on Wednesday, adding that Germany will continue to work under some conditions. Under the current transitional Malian government, there was a danger that Germany-trained Malian soldiers could fight together with Russian troops and commit cruel violations of human rights, Lambrecht said after a cabinet meeting in Messenberg, a city north of Berlin. We cannot support such a system any longer, the defense minister said. That's why we will stop our participation in the EUTM training mission, reports. Now, the decision comes a month after Human Rights Watch HRW accused Malian troops and suspected Russian fighters of executing around 300 civilian men in a central Mali town. Germany was willing to continue its participation in the MINUSMA peacekeeping mission if the UN made sure that shortfalls created by the French withdrawal were filled to ensure the safety of German soldiers, Lambrecht said.
That brings us to the end of the first half of our top stories. More news after the break. Getting into the second half of our top stories, RIB says Prince Kid committed rape. Rwanda Investigation Bureau has accused Dieudonné Ishimwe, the incarcerated chief executive of Rwanda Inspiration Backup, the firm that organizes Miss Rwanda, of rape among other offenses. Ishimwe, a former artist best known as Prince Kid, was arrested last week, with RIB handing over his case file to the National Public Prosecution Authority on Wednesday, May 4. According to Thierry Murangira, RIB spokesperson, Ishimwe faces 3 charges, namely rape, soliciting or offering sexual favors, and sexual harassment. He is accused of committing the offenses against former Miss Rwanda contestants in a period spanning several years. Rape, the most serious offense of the 3, attracts a penalty of 10 to 15 years in prison. Sexual harassment, 6 months to 1 year in prison, and soliciting or offering sexual favors, a maximum of 7 years in jail. The charges also attract millions in damages. Prosecution is expected to examine the case before deciding to produce the suspects before court in the coming days. Prince Kid started organizing Miss Rwanda, one of the most popular annual events in the country, back in 2014.
Moving over to Kenya, 46 presidential candidates going independent in August election. 46 presidential candidates are among 7,212 independent candidates cleared to vie in the August 9 general election. Registrar of Political Parties, N. Direndu, confirmed that by Monday evening, 46 presidential candidates had been cleared to run as independents, making it the highest number to ever apply for the top seat. The presidential candidates cleared include perennial contestants Naslin Omar, Nixon Kukubo, Muthiora Kariara, who also stood for election in 2017. New entrants include gospel artist Ruben Kigame, former Presbyterian Church of East Africa moderator David Giti, and Grita Muthoni. The independent aspirants include 106 governors, 147 senators, 110 women reps, 958 members of the National Assembly, and 5,845 members of the Country Assembly. The number has beaten the 2017 figure of 4,000 independent candidates.
In our next story, dengue fever outbreak. 1 dead, 11 cases recorded in Ivory Coast. A dengue epidemic, a viral disease transmitted by mosquitoes, has broken out since March 22 in Cote d'Ivoire, mainly affecting Abidjan and killing 1 out of 11 recorded cases, the Ivorian Health Ministry announced on Tuesday. There are 9 cases from Abidjan and 2 cases from the towns of Adiake, 90 kilometers east of the Ivorian economic capital of 5.6 million inhabitants, and in Daloa in the center-west, the ministry said. The mode of transmission of dengue is similar to that of malaria, and the current rainy season facilitates the reproduction of mosquitoes in Cote d'Ivoire, where a dengue epidemic broke out in 2019 with 130 cases and 2 deaths reported. The government then launched a mosquito eradication and awareness campaign to counter the spread of this re-emerging disease worldwide.
Humans and hippos learning to live together in the DRC. On the banks of the Rusizi River that divides the Democratic Republic of Congo from Burundi, cohabitation between hippopotamus and villages remains conflictual. Since 2019, at least 7 people were killed, 6 injured by hippos, with hectares of fields laid waste. Environmental activists have multiplied their calls to establish protection mechanisms for hippos, while locals are calling on the government to repair the damages caused by the giant semi-aquatic mammals. Michael Mbimbanda, member of the local committee for hippopotamus protection, on the other hand, has hope in the mammals. We would like for the government to see how it could preserve first, then protect, and also assess how these animals could not be a danger for the population because they are useful to us, the local population. Though they have been aggressive towards us up until now, we could benefit from these animals. Katagota village in the Ruzizi Plain and home to some 14,000 inhabitants at the border with Burundi. The challenge is that people have encroached on the sides of the river in areas where the giant animals habitually forage for food. Officially, it is illegal to occupy a 100-meter strip of land along the riverbanks, but the law is ignored.
All right, we certainly hope that coexistence can be achieved there. You know, interesting thing about hippos, whenever it seems, you've seen those videos of them chasing boats and whatnot, you know, they're actually getting down to the bottom of the bed and then springing up and then down and then springing up. Beautiful animals indeed. Now, something that affects nature is obviously climate change. And after the break, we'll be talking to a climate justice activist on Africa. Good morning. Stay with us.
This is Africa Good Morning, bringing you the latest in news stories. Reinhold Mangundu is a young Namibian scientist and climate justice activist, fighting to ensure Namibia can tackle the worst of the climate crisis. Here he talks with Yana Marie Smith about where his passion comes from and the already worsening impacts of climate change in Namibia. Let's take a look.
Hi, Reinhold. Thank you so much for joining me today. You are an environmental scientist and you are also a climate justice activist here in Namibia. Can you tell me a little bit where this passion comes from for climate and environment?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jana. I'm successful environmental activist as well as a sustainability practitioner. And my passion for people and planet really started at a very young age because I was born in a small village in the north. And unfortunately for me, much what I could see, whether it's the beautiful forest that used to exist, were through narratives and stories told by my dad. And at that point, I think I really got passionate about people and about the environment to really restore the lost forests in our lands, but also in overall to start navigating and co-creating solutions to build the form of future we need, because as a young person, I grew up to see very little compared to the stories that was told by my dad. And since then, as a youngster, as a teenager that embarked on a sustainability journey, whether it's with the Namibia University of Science and Technology or with my studies with the Stellenbosch University, I really grew passionate about people and planet, and therefore committing my whole life and professional career to serve. In the midst of my studying, pursuing my Master's of Philosophy in Sustainable Development Management and Planning with the Stellenbosch University, I really fell in love with the idea of social justice because as a young practitioner or as a young environmentalist, I started realizing that at the center of development should be social justice, because in actual fact, sustainability should be about equity, equality, and the fair distribution of common resources such as water, such as land, and any other precious resources that are acting as life support systems.
Reinhold, for you, what are some of the gravest threats we as Namibians face as a result of the climate crisis?
Yeah. So, Namibia as a country, we are arid in a sense that about 80% of our fresh water, rainwater evaporates. And over the decades, we have been facing very progressive droughts. In 2013, we experienced one of the worst droughts in 30 years. And as climate change continues to worsen, water as a critical resource is going to be affected, because water also drives how systems functions. And for instance, since 2013 to 2019, we have declared a national state of emergency because of drought for 3 consecutive times, And with climate change, it's only going to get worse. We'll be facing more progressive droughts, and some of these, the severity of these droughts are quite evident already. We know what happened in the Kunene for the past 4-5 years, for instance, where local indigenous people face a climate migration. We really start to see that this causes as a cause and effect relationship, because we know the drought affected, for instance, communities in Kunene, but then later on we started seeing people moving to the city in search of greener pastures. And then again, that leads to another pressure in the city. So water is really one of the resources that is going to be affected by climate change, and it's quite critical for us as an arid country. Water is a vital resource for Namibia. It drives how socio-ecological systems function, it drives how people move, it drives the economy. And another element that is sort of going to be affected by climate change is food security, When the drought of 2013 hit Namibia, we became very food insecure. And unfortunately, with us, we are dependent on South Africa. And for the last years, we've started seeing the need and the urgency to sort of promote our local food systems because we have started seeing, courtesy of COVID-19 and now the war in Europe, we are seeing a lot of these food supply chains being affected. And we are going to suffer the most because we are not independent. We do not produce our own healthy and local food. So agriculture, which is also an important sector to Namibia, will be affected. We look at Windhoek and we look at the informal settlements or the poor communities where people are living in very destitute conditions. That what we are seeing is the worse the food security, the more the food insecurity, the more the social problems and health problems in terms of malnutrition. We are seeing, for instance, every fifth child that you find in Namibia is stunned, meaning that they don't get the right nutrition and the right kind of food. So these are some of the complications. And with climate change, all of these complications are going to get worse, and they are going to be exacerbated by that. And I always say, perhaps the next pandemic will be on water and food, because these are critical common resources that shapes how society functions, and even our own economy.
Thank you for staying with Africa Good Morning. I'm sure you found that previous conversation engaging. And just before we talk to Verushka Dumeni, who is also a climate justice activist, let's have a look at the weather. Now, Namibian climate justice activist Verushka Dumeni warns that investing in energy mix, as discussed at the recent energy conference, is too late. She urges the Namibian government to work towards urgent climate-friendly energy investments now. She talks more about this sense of urgency with Yana Marie Smith.
At this conference that was recently concluded, Africa's energy poverty and the need for an energy mix of, say, fossil fuels and renewables was highlighted.
Yes.
Do you think this is still a realistic goal? Is this still something we should be chasing, this energy mix? Or what are your views on that?
Right. So scientists are very clear when it comes to that. It's that we no longer have the time for an energy mix. If we were talking about an energy mix some 30, some 40, 50 years back, it would make sense. However, we are so far down the climate crisis that any emissions, even if it's 1 more ton of emissions into the atmosphere, that will be initially suicide, because we are reaching tipping points. And when we get to tipping points, we don't have the carbon budget for an energy mix anymore. What we need is an energy resolution. We need an energy replacement, right? And it needs to be urgent. Unfortunately, our government, like many governments, are taking advantage of a remaining a remaining oil market, right? They are saying that there is still an oil market and we should invest in it. We should tap into it, right? And they are seeing a lot of foreign companies want to come in a lot of African countries. We are seeing a lot of oil projects develop. And that's because foreign companies are now coming into African countries who are desperate enough for an economic revival and trying to take advantage or trying to exploit any remaining oil reserves, right? And just because it's an investment, our government is welcoming it with open arms, unfortunately. But that's not what it's. We are in a climate crisis. It's an emergency. We are supposed to be focusing on solutions that take us out of the crisis, not solutions that still basically bury us further into the climate crisis. So our Ministry of Mines and Energy was so serious about the climate crisis. They would be inviting investment that is focused on renewable sources and energy efficient technology.
It's been touted and praised, and it's the next big thing, and everyone's talking about it. What are you thinking about this project?
So green hydrogen is one of those projects, like you said, it's like the new kid on the block, right? Everybody kind of wants to try it. It looks very promising. Unfortunately, green hydrogen is it's very resource intensive, meaning that for you to produce this energy, you need a lot of energy input. This begs the question, where is this energy going to come from, right? And they will say, well, since we only have fossil fuels as our main energy source right now, we are going to source this energy from fossil fuels. And that basically renders energy sources such as green hydrogen is not so sustainable. It's not so as eco-friendly as we thought because it's so energy intensive. Everything about this green hydrogen project is very far into the future. We are planning 10, 20 years from now. Only then can we start benefiting from this green hydrogen. But unfortunately, we need that we need that energy revolution right now. We need a new renewable source of energy right now, not 10, 20, 30 years from now. And then it also begs the question of equity, right? With a lot of these novel energy sources, the way that it trickles down in society is very, it's very unequal. It reaches the people that can afford this infrastructure first before it comes to the ordinary Namibian, right? So there's no infrastructure which supports this energy. It's so based into the future, whereas we have an energy potential that we can harvest right now, and it's renewable. We are never going to run out of the sun's heat. We are not going to run out of it, and it's also cheap. Many people can actually tap into this energy source from their own home, meaning that they become energy dependent, actually energy independent. So you see this energy monopoly still going on within all the newer renewable energy sources, where the government doesn't really want to give people energy independence. They still want to produce a source of energy and then sell it to the people.
What's the way forward?
We should be looking at what we have available here. What energy source can we tap into right now and much more easily that doesn't require a more, carbon intensive energy source? The answer is solar. We can create so much of it that we can actually export to a lot more of the Southern African countries and beyond, right? We should be looking at climate smart solutions, right? Not solutions that are halfway sustainable and halfway not sustainable, right? We should look at how can we redesign our cities to be climate smart. How can we redesign our cities to support more pedestrian and cycling rather than only cars? Because unfortunately, that is the way it is right now. We should look at the injustices that are basically proliferated with the climate crisis, right? We already have poverty. How can we better solve the food insecurity with regenerative agriculture? There's so many solutions to a lot of the social problems that we have. And a lot of those solutions can be climate smart. They can be sustainable, right? But because it's not the conventional way of doing it, because it doesn't have as much economic promise as the ordinary solutions are, our government is taking the easy way out.
Thank you for staying with Africa. Good morning. Let's get into economic news stories. Now, in our first story, mistaken identity has never quite cost this much. Why? Because Alibaba lost $26 billion in market value within minutes after a man named Ma was detained. Alibaba, co-founded by Chinese e-commerce giant Jack Ma, saw its Hong Kong listed shares plunge as much as 9.4% after Chinese state media reported that an individual surnamed Ma in the city of Hangzhou, where Alibaba is based, was detained on national security grounds, media reports said. According to China's state broadcaster CCTV, the suspect was placed under compulsory measures on April 25 on suspicion of colluding with overseas anti-China hostile forces to incite secession and incite subversion of state power. The one-sentence report, which was swiftly picked up by other state media outlets and alerted across Chinese news platforms, triggered panic selling in Hong Kong, erasing an estimated $26 billion from Alibaba's market value within minutes, CNN reported. Later clarifications that this was an unrelated Ma led to a rebound, with Alibaba recovering the majority of its losses by day's end. The market's roller coaster reaction is the latest sign of just how skittish investors are getting over China's embattled tech sector, which has been a target of the Chinese government's heavy-handed regulatory crackdown since late 2020, the report added.
International travel sees big 2022 surge. The World Travel and Tourism Council and travel and analytics company Forward Keys have together forecast a major increase in global international flight bookings as international travel takes off. News of the strong recovery highlights a promising prospect ahead for summer holiday travel, with destinations like the Caribbean and Latin America leading the international inbound bookings. According to Forward Keys, the countries leading the ranking of top 20 best performing destinations are Costa Rica, Aruba, the Dominican Republic, and Jamaica, all of which rely heavily upon international travel. These destinations lead with bookings already surpassing pre-pandemic levels. Africa and the Middle East also feature in the top 20 list, with Tanzania, Qatar, and Egypt reaching close to pre-pandemic levels of travel. Last year, the industry's gradual recovery was significantly slowed by the surge in Omicron cases. However, the future is looking brighter for 2022 with positive booking data worldwide. According to the data, Q1 and Q2 figures for this year are showing substantial growth for inbound flight bookings around the world compared to last year, including the Americas, Europe, and Asia. Travelers are eager to spend more on travel following the loosening of restrictions, with heightened demand for premium cabin classes in 2022. Other trends seen include stronger last-minute bookings. Further evidence of the resurgence in travel is shown in arrivals in Europe, with a massive 350% surge in international arrivals for Q1 in 2022 compared to last year. Some good news indeed.
Some good news indeed, and I'll certainly hope to be joining that travel frenzy, possibly in December. We'll see how it goes. All right, over 625 buyers and 20,000 meetings as Indaba kicks off. Close to 625 buyers are attending Africa's Travel Indaba 2022, which kicked off on Monday 2 May at the Inkosi Albert Lutuli Convention Center and Durban Exhibition Center in Durban, KwaZulu-Natal. Over 20,000 meetings have been confirmed on the matchmaking diary system, matching the right buyers with the right exhibitors. An upbeat Themba Khumalo, South African Tourism Acting CEO, expressed delight at the interest that the rest of Africa and the world has once again shown in Africa's Travel Indaba, especially since the show had to take a break due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Delegates from all over the world have arrived in Durban this week, and we are as excited as the rest of the continent to tell our stories of resilience and beauty while we partner and collaborate in order to move Africa forward, he said. Khumalo said the 4-day program was filled with opportunities to provide invaluable outcomes for all the delegates, from the business talk focusing on a number of tourism-related topics for the advancement of the sector, to the speed marketing sessions aimed at showcasing an array of small business from across South Africa. Philip Sitole, Deputy City Manager for Economic Development and Planning Cluster in eThekwini Municipality, issued further assurances that the city's key tourism infrastructure affected during the recent floods were now fully functional. I truly love to see it when businesses converge to figure out how they can work together, because usually, generally, when there's conventions, there's exhibitors. Exhibitors invest so much in being able to exhibit pristine work, but generally the buying is like a roll of the dice. You don't really know whether people are going to buy or not, and that's what I like about the Indaba. You have the buyer and the seller. They know what you want. They align you with what you can get.
They're creating a communication platform.
Exactly,
Yes.
creating a clear passage, which is absolutely fantastic. This is still Africa Good Morning. Now, it's one thing to have money in your pocket. It's another thing to know what it means on the international market. So have a look at the economic indicators up next. Now, I like to spend a considerable amount on Twitter, about possibly an hour a day, and the conversation that has been buzzing in the football world is Ancelotti versus Klopp. Now, if you are paying attention, you know that 2 Champions League finals ago, Real Madrid got the best of Liverpool. Of course, these two teams are absolutely formidable. I mean, there's nothing you can ask of either of them. Real Madrid having the experience, especially in the central midfield, and Liverpool having that blessed Mo Salah and so much more, which makes me feel very excited about the upcoming Champions League final, which will be between Liverpool and Real Madrid. And I can assure you, it will be very hard to stay in your seat. What team do you support?
Because our house is divided, so some of us are supporting by association. So my uncle is Liverpool, so I have to be on that side.
On that side.
Yes.
But personally, you're Arsenal, aren't
yes,
you?
personally, I'm
Clever
Arsenal.
We
Yes.
share that burden. We share the burden of being Arsenal supporters. Of course, Arsenal has been doing fairly well
Yes,
recently.
we have.
Absolutely.
Let's
Kudos.
take our wins.
I think we beat Manchester United 2 weeks ago. I think
Yes.
it's something we can carry on into the year. All right, but you know, beyond banter, there's actual sports news, and a good person to bring that through to you is Ari Hochad with his sports update.
Good day, everyone. Time for international sport, and we start off with soccer news, and it's still the UEFA Champions League that is in the news. A big game that was played, and that was the second semi-final. It was between Manchester City and Real Madrid. It was Manchester City that carried a 4-3 lead into this game. No away goals is applicable in this time, but it was Real Madrid that went through. They won the game by 3-1 to have an aggregate win of 6-5. And they will play against Liverpool in the final, and that final will be played on the 28th of May in Paris. It was a game that was in a way thrown away by Manchester City. They had it all under control. In the 90th minute, they were 2 goals ahead with just 6 minutes of injury time to be played. But then Real Madrid scored twice in injury time to force extra time. And in extra time, it was Benzema that scored. He was brought down in the box. It was a penalty for Real Madrid. And he was brought down by Ruben Dias, and he beat him to score the winning goal, and it was Real Madrid that goes through to the final. That will be a repeat of the final of 2018. That was the last time the two teams, Liverpool and Real Madrid, played in the Champions League final. In that game, it was Real Madrid that won the game by 3-1. On to some golf news, and the power struggle continues with the Rebel League, the so-called LIV Golf International Series of Greg Norman, funded by Saudi Arabia, that is still going ahead next month, the first tournament being played in England. News from the tournament is that there's still a power struggle between the PGA and the European Tour and the Greg Norman-backed LIV Golf International Series, and two players, the latest players that have confirmed that they will play in the series from Europe is high-profile players. It's Lee Westwood and it's also Richard Bland. Both of them will play. There's still speculation that Sergio Garcia's name is mentioned, but that is not confirmed at all. And also there were also speculation of South African Louis Oosthuizen, but that's also not confirmed. That is all still speculation. And now we continue with tennis news on international sport, and news from the Madrid Open that's being played on clay. The men and women playing in that tournament is in the men's draw is that Andy Murray of Britain has withdrawn for his game against Novak Djokovic, the #1 seed. That is because of illness. So Novak Djokovic has got to walk over to the next round. Other high-profile players that was in action is third seed Rafael Nadal. He's in action after being injured for 6 weeks. He shows good form. He beat, in the round of 32, he beat Mojmir Kecmanov. He is from Serbia. The score there was 6-1 and 7-6. Other seeds that's through is a #2 seed Alexander Zverev of Germany is also through to the round of 16, and then also Stefanos Tsitsipas, #4 seed, also still in the tournament. So all the top 4 is still in the tournament. In the women's draw, it was Ons Jabeur. She's from Tunisia. She continued with a good form. She beat former major winner, that is Simona Halep of Romania. She beat them quite convincingly, 6-3 and 6-2 to go through to the next round. She will play in the next round against Katerina Alexandrova, and she's unattached. Let's finish, let's close with some motor racing news, Formula One racing news. It is this Saturday, the Sunday, it is the Miami Grand Prix that's going to take place in the USA. News from the Formula One is that the 2 race directors have not been confirmed to be at the race. A week ago, they both tested positive for COVID-19. There's now 2 race directors. That was after all the chaos last year in Abu Dhabi with the race director then Michael Macy of Australia making controversial calls. So now there's 2 race directors, but both of them have COVID-19 and in doubt to be at the race. It seems like the one, Eduardo Freitas, he will definitely not be able to make it, or that is from reports, but it seems like Niels Wittich might be able to still make it if he can show a negative result and fly in just before the race. If it's not possible for either of them to be at the race, they will be in a race control operations room, and that will be in Geneva. It will be done over the internet then. That's the international sports news for now. I hope you have a great sport day, and we talk again tomorrow. Goodbye.
You okay? You need a minute? Cool. Okay. Listen up, people. I know a thing or two about extinction. And let me tell you, and you'd kind of think this would be obvious, going extinct is a bad thing. And driving yourselves extinct? In 70 million years, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. At least we had an asteroid. What's your excuse? You're headed for a climate disaster, and yet every year governments spend hundreds of billions of public funds on fossil fuel subsidies. Imagine if we had spent hundreds of billions per year subsidizing giant meteors. That's what you're doing right now. Think of all the other things you could do with that money. Around the world, people are living in poverty. Don't you think helping them would make more sense than, I don't know, paying for the demise of your entire species? Let me be real for a second. You've got a huge opportunity right now. As you rebuild your economies and bounce back from this pandemic, this is humanity's big chance. So here's my wild idea. Don't choose extinction. Save your species before it's too late. It's time for you humans to stop making excuses and start making changes. Thank you.
Thank you for staying with Africa. Good morning. Not just today, but throughout the entire week, we had Workers' Day, World Press Freedom Day. Much to celebrate, much to commemorate. We also had the commemorations of Kasinga Day. It truly has been a heavy, jam-packed week, if you will. Of course, filled with all the news and stories which are pertinent and important, stemming from the African continent and beyond. Let's get into the highlights from today's show. 7 dead in attack on Chibok community in northeast Nigeria. AU says Burundi peacekeepers killed in Al-Shabaab attack. Zelensky calls for longer truce to evacuate Mariupol civilians. Alibaba lost $26 billion in market value within minutes after a man named Ma was detained. Champions League finalists confirmed. Those have been our stories.
And with that, we've come to the end of our show, and we bring it we bring the end of our week. We will see you again next week, same time, same place. Do remember that Africa Good Morning is repeated on our OneUp2 website and our DSTV channel 285 and our Gotv channel 94 between 8:30 and 9:30 a.m. every weekday. Now, if you have comments regarding our show, do share them with us on our Twitter and Facebook pages. And if you happen to have videos or happenings of your parts of Africa, do share them with us and we'll gladly include them in our program. I am Glenn Rashipura and this is
Ashwin Mberi, and I'll leave you with something the Shona say. Those who have seen each other can never lose each other. See you Monday.